we should be live. There we go. Let's see, the chat box reset. So it looks like a random person has wandered upon our stream. A master's candidate at a university. I just lost his comment, unfortunately. But he's looking for people who use TDCS to participate in his research. So if that's you, if you've been kind of digging the scene and being like, wow, TDCS is pretty cool, I'm into TDCS, Moses, then I will try to get his contact info. Also, I don't know why my lighting is just awful nowadays. And it's probably because my ring light is downstairs being used as a work light. But I'll go ahead and turn the thing on right here. And I hope that helps a little bit. Hey, everybody. We're here at episode 101. What an exciting thing to have made it this far in. It definitely was a, crazy left field idea when I decided, hey, you know what I think we could do every single day is we could all link up and learn together and study and meditate together and pray together. And I think, we've proven that there's some interest at least. Oh gosh, now it's getting brighter outside, and so it's way too bright in here. This is, oh boy. You know, you buy all the software and all the cameras and all the whatevers, and at the end of the day, it doesn't fucking matter. But yes, I think we've proven that this has value for people, especially with consistency, right? Showing up once, it may not do much for you. Showing up once a week, it'll probably do something for you. Showing up daily, though, is very much proving itself to be something that is impacting people, is helping people, is benefiting people, and is making lives better. So I'm grateful to you guys for allowing this thing to be established. As I say all the time, you know, a teacher is not a person standing by themselves just saying what they know. A teacher is a person who has students, right? That's what makes this work. So I am grateful to you guys. Oof. With that said, I guess I got some announcements to share when folks show up. I know NyQuil's talking about coming out here. I know a couple other people are talking about kind of trying to come out here and or try to get down to Arizona. We actually just got a lead on some very cool stuff. I'm going to need a hand carrying stuff and transporting it. So, any of you who want to lend a hand, NyQuil, there he is, bro. Good morning. I just saw your comment on my IG post, bro. I don't know what your prayer was, but I hope I answered it. Let me also say, NyQuil, this you probably don't know yet, but yesterday after my little adventure, I got my wife was like, "Hey, do you want this?" and sent me this awesome picture of a podium, like a speaker's podium from a church, kind of like an altar. And I was like, yeah, I definitely want it. She's like, well, it's free, and you just got to go next town over to get it. So I went over to this church, and indeed, they were giving it away for free. I got to go back today with another strong person, because it's really heavy, solid wood, hand-carved, and loaded up. And when I was there, the lady was like, hey, by the way, we're getting rid of pews also, like church seats. And that's something that Chris and I have talked about getting for the Santa Muerte temple for a minute. Like, oh man, only if we can find a place. Like, I don't want to buy them. They're very expensive. And boom, there it is. They kind of have fallen into our lap. That said, the pews are very long. They will not fit in my CRV. So I'm going to need a truck, and they're definitely going to be heavy. And it'll probably be like, load them up and let's take a trip down to Arizona to put them in the Santa Muerte temple. But if anyone's interested in that kind of stuff, that is definitely time. There's definitely time that we can do that together, and of course, it'll be a heck of a ride. You know, we'll cruise. It's about a 14-hour drive from here down to AZ. I've done it before. If necessary, I will spring for a hotel room and shit. The temple will spring for a hotel room. I got all those Hilton points because I got that whatever that Amex Hilton card. So it won't really be a springing for, but we'll burn some of our points, get a room halfway, and continue the journey. I usually go just straight through, but we could do it that way. But yeah, if anyone's down to help with that has to be, the only thing is it has to be within the next 2 weeks. So part of it, the bigger part of it, is going to be finding a vehicle that these things fit in that I can then bring them down to Arizona. So That's all getting worked on. It'll be evolving. I just wanted to share that announcement with folks because I know a bunch of you guys have been talking about coming out here. Specifically, NyQuil's been trying to do the 2-for trip, and that's kind of a really good like come here and then bring it right there. So we can definitely do that. With that said, we're going to continue on yesterday's lecture because he was really just getting onto the topic. Laying out the background. He was like, all right, well, having said all that, what I really want to talk about today is interoception and this, and then boom, like we kind of hit our time limit. So I want to dive back into it. I did share the link to the Discord. So if you want to, I am quite sure we will not go through the rest of it today. Let me jump over and see the time marker on it. Yeah, I think we paused at, we paused at 29:42 and the whole thing is 1:20:40. So there's about an hour left, and I would expect that, like yesterday, we'll kind of tiptoe through, and I will pause and give commentary, feedback, context, both for your edification and so YouTube doesn't kick us off. On this theme of interoception, though, I have found it completely fascinating to note that the more perception we have, the greater perception, I might say, or the more accurate perception. I'm not sure exactly what the point is. I guess the more accurate perception we have of our own body's internal processes, for example, the beating of our heart, that's the one that he keeps going to because that's the one his research is on. The greater control we have over our emotions, possibly the more empathy we have, and I'm going to posit that outside of Hugo Critchley's domain, the more in tune we can become with our spiritual work, our spiritual efforts, and our spiritual court. So with all that given, I think this is a really important point of intersection between the biological and the spiritual, because it's certainly a point of intersection between the biological and the cognitive, right? As we're about to hopefully get into here, literally our heartbeat determines our cognitive reality. What he had just showed us, and this one I've been reeling about all day, or all night, excuse me, was that whether the phase of your heartbeat that you're in, systole or diastole, depending on the phase of your heartbeat that you are in, your body responds up to considerably more extremely to a fear trigger. So meaning if you see something scary or catch out of the corner of your eye something scary in one phase, nothing. If you catch it in another phase, you freak out. So just on that basic level, being in touch with our heart, and I wonder then if we can kind of, and further research is certainly merited on my part to determine this, be in touch with our heart rate through our respiration, through our breathing, because those two things are pretty much identically tied together. And in the course of that, be aware of our breathing and then determine our heart rate and use that to either face scary things with more courage or to be aware of someone else's and show them something scarier.
And there
So,
is
we'll continue.
Seems to be sensitive to the matching.
Oh, you guys can't hear because I have it on my speakers. Hang on. See, I know this now. There's no surprises anymore with the AV stuff. It only took 100 episodes for me to learn how to work my equipment. Which, par for course.
Of the notes that people heard and the timing of their heartbeats. That's relevant to heartbeat timing experiments. Anyway, so insula is sensitive to internal bodily signals. Appears to
Okay, awesome questions are coming up in chat, so I got to do all that. Amigo, welcome. Curly Q, welcome. What do mushrooms look like? So we were talking about you yesterday because it definitely ties in the vagus nerve. So you have two vagus nerves we found out. One's up here, one's down here. And when he was describing yesterday, kind of like how the breathing and heart rate stuff came together, someone was like, "Oh, this sounds like Wim Hof," and I was like, "Yeah, man, I wish what do mushrooms look like was here because he's our Wim Hof instructor." Yeah, I don't know if you're certified, but you're certified in my heart, buddy. So Amiga is very interested in knowing about the machete, and particularly in regards, you had asked me in DM about the machete in terms of Santa Muerte. And as I said, I have not really seen it in use with her in her traditions anywhere. I've seen machetes in use in African diasporic traditions for sure, Afro-Cuban traditions, yes. Particular for cleansings, you had asked me about. I've seen a line of fula, a line of gunpowder, black powder laid on the machete, and then You know, that is often lit to chase things out. I've seen the machetes used in a variety of sort of ritual settings, but never in the context of Santa Muerte, which is interesting. It's very interesting that that's particularly what came to you. You will, I'm sure, just because I haven't seen it doesn't mean it's not there. Let me make that fucking abundantly clear. You will absolutely find Santa Muerte houses probably in Texas, where you see a lot of like more Santa Muerte sort of Palo Mayombe hybrid stuff, where you got kind of like paleros who have worked in Santa Muerte. Down in more southwest, you seem to have Santa Muerte devotees who have worked in aspect of Palo, and both, I guess. But in Texas especially, I've seen, and some other areas more east, you have paleros who have brought Santa Muerte into their framework. It's kind of like, which framework are you working in? And so that I've seen more of, and I'm positive 100% you'll find a house that uses machetes. 1,000%. And that's not, I haven't seen it. Anyway, to the video. Now that I have my audio set up, and I'll bring it up on screen because I know you guys couldn't see it just there. Got it. Boom. So what do mushrooms look like? You missed part one of this. I'm just going to call you Chris because I know your name. And if you don't want me to say your name, just be like, I don't know who you're talking to. So kind of what we dug into was like literally whether you're in systole or diastole, so which phase of your heart you're in will determine your fear response. But moreover, he's going to go in and say how your cognitive experience and your emotional experience are both gated by, meaning kind of like constrained or initiated by or determined through. I guess that's what a gate does. It allows things to be determined through it. So gated by your heartbeat. So here we go. Except I lost the screen. Gosh,
enable a translation of bodily signaling into reportable experiences, which could be described as feeling states, which may be purely physiological or maybe emotional. And Insula seems to support this comparison with between your own physiological states, so heartbeat timing, with what's going on in the environment. So the delay presence in a node in this context. So I just want to return back to the observation I presented at the start, because this really I think it is for us an important finding, and to say the timing of individual heartbeats as signaled by cardiac baroreceptors.
Okay, so filling in on this one thing, but this is like a totally technical talk, and he's nervous and all that. So basically, there are pressure receptors in the upper tubes of your heart, and those send a signal to certain parts of your brain every time the heart beats, and that helps you coordinate, or helps your body sort of unconsciously coordinate blood pressure and heart rate.
Influences the perception of fear, and I'll go into the backstory of that. There have been a number of studies over the years, dating back to the late 60s, looking at the effects of heart timing on various tasks.
Interesting.
Usually reaction time tasks. The whole field, to some extent, got overly complicated, and people moved away from it because one of the main outcome measures was actually a heart rate change, and it kind of ate into itself in having an outcome that was part of the design. But anyway, it's been noted for a while that if you give someone a pain stimulus in time with heart beating, then you get an attenuation of the perception of pain. You get attenuation processing of the pain, as shown with pain-evoked potentials. You get a reduction in nociceptive reflexes, and that's been argued to actually have some meaning in terms of the pathogenesis, for example, of hypertension. So if high blood pressure and high heart rate is limits pain perception, then this may be a kind of a learned mechanism.
Interesting.
In hypertension.
I mean, that would make sense in some sense, because usually when you're in a conflict situation, right? You're chasing an animal's chasing you, you're chasing a person's chasing you, whatever, you are going to have higher heart rate and blood pressure. So it would make sense for body to be like, yeah, let's tone down the pain perception right now.
By augmenting the effect of baroreceptor activation using external neck suction. So you suck around the carotids at the time of cardiac ejection when the blood's coming out. You can enhance the effect on pain, reflex, perceived pain, and ERP to pain using this method.
That's interesting. Phase-related external suction, so they have some kind of like suction devices. They're not like, it's external. That might be something for people to work with in a practice. We just got to get someone to be here giving us hickeys in tune with our heartbeat.
Imaging study on actually pain effects or heart timing effects on pain. Some years ago, we were measuring lots of physiology in the scanner, including beat-to-beat blood pressure, sleep conductance, ECG. We were presenting very brief electrodermal shock stimuli, either on systole around the T wave or on diastole or pre-systole.
So basically, they broke the heart down into systole and diastole, kind of the two electrical parts of the heartbeat. Excuse me. And so they're shocking the skin either on one part or the other part here.
Around the QRS complex. And what we found was that if you present a pain stimulus on the heartbeats, you get an attenuation of the normal blood pressure response to the shock stimulus. And you see that for both components of blood pressure. Let's say systole interacts with the processing of shock. The cardiac signal interacts with the processing of shock to inhibit the autonomic reflex.
Well, now, and I wonder if it's a pain specific thing, because they're using shocks, which are electric, and obviously the heart's electric. So I wonder if that comes into play at all, right? They're not like taking a knife and like razor and making a little cut every time.
The shock experience, and the brain correlates of that were seen as follows. Firstly, there's an inhibition of activity, a relative inhibition of activity within insular regions during this processing of shock stimuli at systole during the cardiac firing, baroreceptor firing. There's also a relative inhibition of activity in the dorsal brainstem, here dorsal pons, but also going up to PAG.
I'll give it a like. I don't know. I'd give it a dislike.
Effects were seen in amygdala. So the amygdala seems to be enhancing its response when pain was presented at systole. So this study gave us, if you like, the first look with neuroimaging to show that the processing of salient external stimuli appears to be gated or influenced as a function of cardiac cycle of these signals that occur phasically from the heart. And the brain regions involved in suppressing this pain response, as measured in this case by an autonomic reflex, include insular and dorsal brainstem and amygdala. And the amygdala seems to be doing the opposite thing to insular and dorsal brainstem. So that got us interested in this whole area. We wanted to know whether we could use this effect in other ways, and whether other types of stimuli were affected by cardiac cycle, particularly salient emotional stimuli. And the next set of experiments we ran, we presented people with emotional facial expressions either on systole or before, and found the following.
What do you guys think that top face is supposed to be expressing? I think the bottom one is disgust.
That if we present disgust or happy stimuli at systole compared to diastole, we get an increased slowing of heart rate.
Whoa.
So significant but small. It's about a 1.5% shift in slowing of the heart. And only for disgust stimuli did we get a change in the rating of disgust stimuli, and that was very small effect, but significant. We looked at the brain areas that seem to be mediating this effect of heart on processing emotional faces, and found the periaqueductal grey region predicted the heart rate changes, and to some extent the lower rating in disgust stimuli, and particularly orbitofrontal cortex also sensitive to the changes that systole evokes on the processing of disgusted faces. So this study showed, beyond the pain observation, that the effects of cardiac cycle on disgust, as manifest by evoked heart rate response, slowing heart rates, and on subjective ratings, which were increased when disgust was presented at systole. But the effects were very small. And there are corresponding changes in periaqueductal grey orbitofrontal cortex, and there are also effects, at least for the heart response.
So I feel like he's sharing a lot of information that is not as significant as the information he has already shared.
To happy faces. That experiment, we didn't test fear stimuli, and that was a big oversight, I think. And so we went on to test the response or the interaction between the processing of fear.
Oh, that's interesting. They went
They
with happiness and disgust before, and sadness before fear. Let's see fear, because fear you feel in your heart for sure.
And cardiac cycle. And it's an oversight because I think, the data on the attentional blink test, which I'll come to soon, suggested that, fear's got a close relationship to anxiety. We know arousal, cardiovascular arousal contributes to anxiety states, and we wanted to get at those mechanisms. So we repeated the same experimental paradigm using fearful and neutral faces presented at systole and at diastole, getting people to rate the faces a few seconds later. And what we found, as I said earlier, was that the processing of fearful faces at systole was enhanced. We got an increased rating of the intensity of fear in the face if it's a fearful face, and no effect for neutral stimuli. And that effect seemed to be mediated by changes in the amygdala, which reflected an interaction between heart timing and emotion. And so enhanced response to fearful faces during systole in right amygdala, a true interaction in left amygdala. And actually that effect in amygdala correlated with the individual subject differences in trait anxiety score. So there was a relationship between this process of psychophysiological interaction between heart signals of arousal and the processing of potential threat signals or fear stimuli.
So this is that thing again where they showed kind of a bunch of random images with faces stuck in the mix and saw how long it took them to respond, I think.
It starts to introduce this study used an emotional attentional blink test to look at the processing of fear and other emotions during a period where it's there's a lot of pressure on attentional resources and perceptual resources, and usually emotional stimuli break through more frequently than neutral stimuli. And when we timed the presentation of this target to systole and diastole. So we compared the effects of heart timing for neutral, happy, disgust and fearful faces at that time point, and showed that the detection of fear but not other emotions and perhaps an opposite effect.
Interesting. That's very interesting.
Much better.
Wow. So like it really makes a big difference in fear.
Detected when presented concurrently with a cardiac signal.
And something was worse. Let's see. Oh, that's neutral.
Presented concurrently with a
Well, so that's interesting. I don't know how that's negative, but the neutral bars go in the complete other direction on that chart. There it is.
Individuals differed in the extent they got this effect. Some people going up to 25+% difference
Wow.
in detection of fear.
Wow, look at that. Look at that outlier to the lower right there. Got to get back to that chart. Yeah, look at there are people here who had a very big difference in their ability to detect fear at that heart rate. And then there's a couple people who had no difference. Or were worse, I guess. And then 3 people who had no difference. But the vast majority of people seem to, it's almost 20% better in most cases. It's about 15%. and 25%, and in this case, like 35% better. Wow.
In the detection of fear at systole. So fear detection is also enhanced at systole. Emotional phases break through the attentional blink. Cardiac cycle modulates the effect for fear with enhanced processing of fear at systole, and there's no effects on other emotions, and possibly an opposite effect for neutral phases. We wondered whether this heart timing effect on threat stimuli was clinically relevant, and we've been conducting a large survey of patients accessing secondary care facilities, looking at the differential processing of fear versus neutral stimuli.
I like that this dude basically played Fear Factor with people while he was like, I don't know, monitoring their hearts and brains. Like, for those of you who saw yesterday, he had the video with like fake amputations and stuff. Like, this is kind of intense. I like this, especially because he's so like chill and nervous about presenting it.
Also doing measures of interoceptive ability and other signatures of emotional vulnerability or anxiety disorder likelihood. But we also did a lab experiment on spider phobics that also pursued this issue of whether heart timing can change or influence emotional processing.
Oh no, I lost the video. Sorry, guys.
That's a computerized exposure therapy to spiders as fear stimuli, presenting pictures of spiders at systole for some subjects and at diastole for other subjects during repeated exposure treatment sessions. A third group of subjects just saw pictures of spiders irrespective of when they were presented in the cardiac cycle.
And these are people who were there because they were scared of spiders.
150 millisecond presentation. What we found initially was that we had a lot of dropouts in the group that spiders were presented at systole. They found the spiders. This was a pilot. This is pilot data on the first 30 subjects.
So it makes a huge difference whether you scare people on systole or diastole. That's crazy. So the part of the heartbeat that you scare people on clearly makes a very big difference.
A large group of participants. So the group sizes are quite small. In this group, because we had 3 dropouts in the systole group, there are only 7 subjects. But those 7 subjects who had the stimuli presented at systole, by the end of the exposure sessions, were more likely to approach a molt of a spider, a kind of spider skin, real tarantula skin, than people that saw pictures of spiders at diastole, or this control group, surprisingly, who just saw pictures of spiders irrespective of their heart cycle. So this pilot data is encouraging. It suggests that there's better processing of spiders if you present them at systole, and surprisingly better than if it crosses systole and diastole. Presenting spiders.
What was most interesting there is that the exposure therapy was more successful, right? They were more likely to approach a spider molt, like a real one, afterwards. That's pretty big. Like, they got scared more, but being more scared helped them get over their fears more.
Spiders at systole led to greater approach behaviour in the final session, and at least it's a kind of proof of principle study that suggests that the coupling of heart to anxiogenic stimuli might be a target for interventions, and the way we can think of interventions is not just in this biobehavioural way, but we can potentially use blood pressure drugs, for example, to help certain individuals with anxiety. Interesting. So those are the conclusions he's making, right? Because blood pressure and heart rate are what are coming together to trigger fear. So he's talking about using blood pressure drugs to make people less afraid. That's interesting. We'll go for a few more minutes here. So fear perception and detection is enhanced by cardiac afferent signals. It's the opposite to what is seen for pain. And I'm saying that, but we haven't done a study concurrently of both the pain and the fear we're just rounding up a behavioural fear conditioning experiment that may address this issue a bit better. If you have a faster, stronger heartbeat, you bias your perception towards processing threats. At least the
Interesting.
data that are presented show that. And there is
If
this
you have a
relation-
faster, stronger heartbeat, you bias yourselves towards perceiving threats. And of course, then by contrast, if you have a slower, weaker heartbeat, you bias yourselves against perceiving threats. So it's interesting to consider in meditation how we give ourselves a slower, weaker heartbeat, and then we don't feel as threatened, maybe. And maybe that's why meditation is so helpful against anxiety, where you have sort of like a heightened or amplified, you might say, imbalanced perception of threat, right? You're perceiving threat where there is no threat, hence anxiety. And maybe that's why meditation is effective against that.
Relationship with anxiety, and
Oh,
it
there we
offers
go.
the potential for therapeutic interventions. How long have I? Okay. I just want to say a few things about the concepts of interoceptive prediction, because it is relevant. I mean, clearly, there are differences in threat as a predictor of potential damage to self, whereas pain is actual damage to self. But the concept of interoceptive predictive coding is emerging in the literature from a number of groups, and people are getting quite interested in the idea that the prediction about the internal states of the body is relevant not only to emotional processing, but has a relationship to self-representation and sense of presence and internal agency somehow, allowing the building up of other aspects of consciousness.
I mean, it really sounds like the guy's talking about if you can sense your body, you're more spiritually empowered. That's what I heard.
This kind of relates what I've said about anxiety a bit further. It's a model of panic attack from Dave Clark, where an individual feels a twinge in their chest, and that makes them a little bit anxious, and the muscles tighten up and they start breathing heavily, and the heart races a bit more because they've become more aroused, and they feel that and think that the heart is going to stop, that they're going to die, and it adds to more tension and anxiety, and this vicious feedback loop can not quite be stopped when you stop and monitor your heart even more intensively. And what's going on is actually not so much problems with the sensation of bodily signals or the intensity of them, but with the interpretation of them, or a misinterpretation of them, or the initial trigger being an unexpected change in body state, but something more goes on to lead to a panic attack. And actually, many people have highlighted the relationship between unexplained arousal and anxiety. So Martin Paulus and Murray Steen proposed this insular view of anxiety, whereby they argue that the insular is a comparative. The premise is that individuals who are prone to anxiety show an altered interoceptive prediction signal. So they have an augmented detection of the difference between observed and expected body states, so what they experience and what they expect their body to be doing in terms of feedback and arousal. As a consequence, increased prediction signal of a prospective aversive body state triggers an increase in anxious effects. So they're coupling the unpredicted, unexplained arousal to anxiety. That kind of idea that the expectation of what your body is doing is also embodied in proposal by Tony Singer and others about how risk and uncertainty is processed, but also...
So, I mean, most of this stuff is just technical stuff that's not relevant to those of us who are not technically interested in his field and asking him to prove it. But what he's linking together here is feelings in the body. Feeling means two things in English. Feeling means emotion, and feeling means sensation. And he's linking those two things together.
To how we empathize to other people. We know what our body state would be doing if we're in a particular emotion.
So that's interesting what he's talking about there, that body state empathy, because I experienced that in divination. I know other people talk about it too, where something about the tone of a person's voice, you can feel in your body where that would come from, and you're able to kind of, I don't know, bring your body there. And then all of a sudden things get really clear.
State, we can make a prediction of that and judge someone else in relation to that prediction. To a degree, the mismatch between perceived body state or expected body state and observed body state can be seen in clinical groups. This shows a recent study we've been conducting in adults with autism.
Whoa, that's a huge difference.
Looking at how well people perform a heartbeat detection task. So this, if you like, is an objective measure of interoceptive sensitivity, and how much their lives are affected by autonomic symptoms or symptoms from the body. And neither the score on these questionnaire measures of interoception or the heartbeat detection task predicted day-to-day experiences of anxiety, but what did was the mismatch between interoceptive score on questionnaires, subjective measure, and interoceptive accuracy, the objective measure, and that predicted trait anxiety in the autism group, called the mismatch interoceptive traits prediction error.
Interesting.
And it also predicted deficits in empathy in that group, suggesting corresponding also to what Tanya Singer proposed in relation to prediction and empathy.
So a lot of this comes down to one's ability to perceive one, or I guess predict, they're calling it perceive or predict one's own body state, and that having a lot to do with the, we'll call it parameters or boundaries or limitations on one's ability to perceive emotional states. And in the first case, what he was saying was that the mismatch between the perceived bodily state and the actual bodily state is, I think, what he was attributing some amount of anxiety to.
Predictive coding models have expanded to look at aspects of self-representation, presence in environments, agency and emotion. This is a model from Anil Seth relating internal agency, autonomic interoceptive prediction, and both.
So Anil Seth's a researcher that we've seen TED Talks from, and we'll maybe pull up more of his stuff soon.
This is the rubber hand illusion. If you see.
Yeah, I believe we saw Anil Seth teach on the rubber hand illusion. This is where they put a rubber hand out that in a position so your brain starts to think it's your hand, and then they stab it with a fork.
Being stroked in front of you while feeling your own unseen hand being stroked at the same time. You may get the illusion that this rubber hand is part of your body. You're less likely to get that illusion if you score highly on tests of interoceptive accuracy on heartbeat detection tests. This is Manos Sakharis and his group. So you score less if you're a good interoceptor on the question, I felt the rubber hand was my hand, and other more objective measures of getting the rubber hand illusion, this illusion of body ownership, also show lower values if you're a good interoceptor. Consistent with the idea that a stronger internal representation of self protects you against illusions of body ownership. We've been doing virtual rubber hand illusion with virtual reality, and what we've been doing is adding physiology into the picture, so the hand pulsates in time with the participant's own
heartbeat. That's cool.
Enhances the illusion. You get more enhancements of the illusion if they are a good interoceptor. Suggesting that internal physiological signals shape body ownership in other ways to always.
So that was huge. He just ran right over it. He said that in the normal rubber hand illusion, people who have good interoception didn't fall for it. But when they add a simulated heartbeat to it, people who have good interoception do fall for it. So the indication is that really that detection of heart rate and the synchrony of heart rate, the perceiver's heart rate and whatever's being perceived, really seems to lead to a sense of unification or identity almost.
Negating them. I am going to round up now. The insula has been proposed to have this representation across its posterior to anterior dimension, whereby primary representation of body states occurs in the posterior regions of insula. As it's integrated, the signals, the representations in insula are integrated with other aspects of environmental and physiological functioning. You get an enriched representation of selfhood, according to Bud Craig, in anterior parts of insula, communicating with singular ventromedial prefrontal cortex and other prefrontal regions. And this year, Lisa Feldman Barrett and Kyle Simmons have proposed that anterior insula, which is a granular cortex in nature, is the source of interoceptive predictions, which whereas granular cortex has this primary representation, and somewhere in between, in mid-insular dysgranular cortex, you get the generation of prediction errors through this comparative mechanism.
So he's talking about different parts of the brains that have different capabilities, basically, and appear in different evolutionary levels of species. Very technical stuff. Let's see.
For fear, because they're going in the opposite direction. So there are two processes going on. It's not everything's inhibited by heartbeats, because that's a self-related stimulus. In this case, the fear is done in something else. And other people, so this is from Talamburgi's lab, have shown that heartbeat-related neural signals, in this case the heartbeat evoked potential, enhances the processing of fine gratings. This fine stimulus.
So, I mean, again, it's only going to be technical from here, and there's no reason for us to belabor the point. And if you guys wanted a neuroscience class, you probably would have signed up for one. But the key interoceptive trait, characteristic, or whatever that this guy keeps harping on about is the ability to detect one's own heart rate, right? That's the test they use in all these. So it seems like that's a pretty cool and solid indicator. So with that said, let's connect with the heart just a tiny bit. And I don't mean in meditation. We'll watch one more vid, maybe just another little short, 15, 20 minute, because we got time. Heart Math Institute. So these guys talk a lot about the heart, the bioelectric fields coming from the heart. And you know what? This is someone else who spoke at that Science and Non-Duality conference. Let's do this. This is a bit loud. Jeez Louise. Okay, we'll pull that down a little bit. Hopefully that volume's a little better. But yeah, let's watch this.
How many of you have said or heard somebody say somewhat commonly, on some level we're
Here we
all
go.
connected?
Here we go. This is what I want. This is exactly the point I was hoping to make right now.
Well, hopefully today I can actually show you some new scientific evidence of at least one of the levels on how we really are connected.
There we go. I got the
So
video.
we can take some of the mystery out of part of that. Not that what I'm going to talk about is the whole story. How many of you are somewhat familiar with Heart Math, Instant Heart Math? Oh, wow. A lot of you. This is our mission for those of you that aren't.
So this is the dude from Heart Math
So
talking
a
about
mission
this.
Heart Math from day one. We were founded in 1990, actually. Is to help people bring their physical, mental, and emotional systems into balanced alignment with their heart's intuitive guidance. And we, at Heart Math, we mean that literally. We really do see the heart, and doing 30 years of research now around how the heart is a source of intelligence. That a lot of the mystics and great religions and philosophers have been right all along, actually. So we're bringing some real kind of, I think, leading edge science to that. But as we connect with our own inner guidance from the heart, that really unfolds the path for becoming heart-empowered individuals, okay? Which means we choose the way of love through compassionate care for Earth and others as well. So that's really what we're all about, and I've developed a lot of techniques and programs and technologies to help support that. So our research is really in three kind of buckets or main categories. Personal, which I'm not going to talk about today, but that's many, I think 400 and some independent research studies later on that side of things now. of teaching people how to better self-regulate, how to connect with their deeper innate.
And that's a lot of
intelligence.
what we've been looking at, right?
Social, which we're putting a lot of our focus on now. How do we get along better? Right, within our families, schools, communities, because that really takes sometimes some work, and people need help and processes and techniques to really get along and get rid
I
of
wonder to what
arm's
extent
length,
syncing heart
separations
rates
between people.
helps that.
And global. So global is what I'm going to be talking more about today, that side, but a little bit on the personal because it relates to the global. So what you're looking at here are heart rhythms. Okay? A lot of people don't know that in a healthy person, our heart rate changes with each and every heartbeat.
We did learn that.
And that's called heart rate variability.
We
Very
learned that.
different than heart rate, which is just the average, how many times did the heart beat, right, in a minute. But without this beat-to-beat change, this natural inner variability, there would be no heart rhythm. So these lines here, which is the change in time between each heartbeat, the heart rhythm, would be flat lines, right, if it was the time between each heartbeat was the same. So away from you guys on the left, okay, the red one, it's what the heart rhythm looks like typically when we're feeling things like impatience, frustration, worry, things like this. So it's at some of our early work in the 1990s, looking in the lab at all these 3 other acronym things, EEGs and skin conductance and all the stuff we do. What we found was that it's the rhythm of the heart, the pattern of the rhythm, that most reflects our emotional state.
Well, that's
Whether we're
interesting
aware
because of
it or not, whether we're consciously
the research we were
aware of
just
what we're
seeing on
feeling.
the systole
Now,
diastole
there's a whole
thing.
science of why that's true. I won't go into today, but
Oh, that's probably the whole science of why that's true that he's talking about.
that's what the one on the red one is what we call an incoherent rhythm. And it quite literally reflects the activity in our nervous system. Right? So it's incoherent. Things aren't communicating well. The inner systems are out of harmony. Literally, measurably. Same person we're looking at here. So the blue one on the right is what we call coherence or heart coherence. So this is the heart's rhythm, which it naturally emerges when we're feeling things like love, kindness, appreciation, compassion. Okay? Make sense? And so chasing that rabbit down the hole, there's now like literally 400 independent studies that have confirmed that as we teach people how to spend more time in the coherent state, how to shift into that state and practice it, and that becomes our new, what we call baseline, that is ultimately the ultimate optimal state. Brain is the big winner. We think more clearly. We're more connected with our intuition. Better outcomes in wide range of health, lowered blood pressure, better hormones, all that stuff. So that's a good state we want to get into, right? Okay, so I'm going to come back to that in a minute, so coherence. So switching now to about 8-9 years ago, we launched a special project called GCI for short, or the Global Coherence Initiative. This is really a project to bring more rigor into the science and study of interconnectivity. How are we interconnected with each other and the earth itself? So this is a science-based, co-creative project that's really intended to unite people in heart-focused care and intention to facilitate the shift in global consciousness. Arguably, we could say it's fairly unstable these days. We're feeding the field too much, hate and polarizations and these types of things. So, but if we want to help shift that into more balance, cooperation, enduring peace, it's really our mission. So the kind of high-level overview of the Global Coherence Initiative is it's really meant to help connect people globally who really want to make a difference through our caring intentions. So most of there's 200 and some thousand people involved now, but these are primarily people who get it. We already know that what we think and feel, especially feel, that doesn't just stay inside of our body, it actually reaches outside of us.
Yeah, he was talking about feeding the field there,
There's
which,
a lot of research on that
we
as well.
talk about that.
Won't go
And
into.
for those of you guys who have
And a lot of,
rocked with us
education,
for
free programs to help educate
101
people.
episodes or whatever, we've looked at heart math before, but we've talked a lot about synchrony. We've talked about the human bioelectric field, how that's centered in the heart, and how every seemingly independent thing in the universe, through every type of energy in the universe, affects one another and brings each other into synchronization. So feeding the field is the term he used to put negative emotions out into that greater mix of synchronies.
And guiding to where to send our energetic contributions. And a kind of a very important part is Earth monitoring. So I'll show you a little bit about. So these are our high-level hypotheses. First one is really not a hypothesis. This is really well established, and that is that our cognitive functions, our emotions, our behaviors are affected by the energetic fields we live in. Earth, the sun, for example. Okay? Second
Sound
one
familiar?
is that the Earth's magnetic fields act as, literally, as carriers of biologically relevant information that we're all connected to. In other words, what I'm suggesting is us works just like our cell phones. You get out your phone, right? You're talking to somebody. Well, how does your picture voice get from your phone to the cell tower? It's a magnetic field, electromagnetic field that's carrying that information. Call it a carrier wave, right? So I'm just saying we work the same way. That's what I'm suggesting here. So we're all connected to the bigger field and feeding into what I think of, or what we call a global information field. So it's kind of the sum of all of humanity. And if that's true, this means that when we come together, when large numbers of people are consciously creating more heart-centered states of care, love, kindness, compassion, we can generate a more coherent field, right? That can benefit the whole world, because we all live within the big field environment. And not just humans, animals, trees, plants, right? We're all interconnected through the global field. So here's some of the early evidence.
I would say that, spiritually speaking, this is true to my experience.
That a lot of people aren't aware of. It kind of blew me away when I first learned of it. This is data that was generated by a Russian astrophysicist, Alexander Chesovsky, published in 1926. So he was drafted into World War I, and being an astrophysicist, he was keeping one eye on what the sun was doing. But meanwhile, down here on Earth, being a human, in the war, it appeared to him that when there was more solar activity, solar flares and these types of things, that people down here on Earth just kind of got stupid, right? So I got him intrigued. So he did an exhaustive study of human history after the war. So that if you start to the far left, on the blue line on top, that's 1749. Then it wraps around on the bottom of the blue line to 1926. What's being plotted in the blue line is a dot each year for the number of major human events that occurred that year. Revolution, start of wars, big things, right? The red line on the bottom is the solar cycle for the same time period. You think there might be a relationship there? It's amazing. And this has been, of course, been confirmed many, many times over and brought into modern times, and the same thing is still true today. So that may sound like, these background fields are out to get us. No. Those peaks in the solar cycles, which is a 10.5 to 11-year cycle, are also the greatest periods of human flourishing.
And of course, this connects directly with our understanding of the sun in astrology, right? The sun is the source of flourishing, yeah.
In science, music, arts, right? So think of this as an energetic influx. And it really gets down to how conscious we are, how self-regulated we are. How do we use that energy?
Now, of course, I'll say we don't really know what the correlation here is here. We don't know that the sun causes this. It could be, as I posit, that the same thing causes both that increased activity in the sun and increased activity in humans. Or it could be, the sun affects the crops that we eat during those. Or it could be very nonlinear. So it's nonetheless interesting to notice the correlation.
Right? If you're a politician and you're not well self-regulated, you go start wars. Right? Or you get in more traffic accidents and squabbles and arguments and so on. Or we use it to co-create, to solve new problems. So to do science, we have to measure things. So listening in on the Earth's energetic systems, we created what we call the Global Coherence Monitoring System. And this is a global network of some of the most sensitive magnetometers that were designed specifically to measure the resonant frequencies in the Earth's magnetic fields. It's what the one in Boulder Creek, California looks like at our facility. But we have these around the world now: Canada, South Africa, New Zealand, Lithuania, Saudi Arabia.
I noticed they were missing a bunch, like on the East
Colombia is
Coast
going in next,
and kind of in
for
Eurasia.
example. It's the only globally interconnected monitoring system specifically designed to measure the resonance of the Earth that exists. So this is some real data here. This is the little white dots you see in the center of these two graphs is Earth. See, there's some relatively new satellites that are visualizing the magnetic field of Earth, the geomagnetic field.
Sweet.
And what's neat about this image is you can actually see the ringing.
See on the right there, that little white Earth and those rings of magnetic field? You guys may remember 2 weeks ago when we were doing like energy field meditation, all those images I was showing, the different images of the human electromagnetic field, and how it was these kind of nested rings with that donut shape, that toroidal funnel shape. It's exactly it, right? So that's the magnetic field of your heart. That's the magnetic field of the Earth. And they're all nested and nested and nested and nested.
The vibration of the Earth's field. Can everybody see that? So this is like the North Pole, South Pole, the geomagnetic field. Okay, that's a static or a stationary field, like a refrigerator magnet, pure magnetic field. Those field lines, okay, I'm going to just time travel back to science class, back in high school, junior high. Remember when you got to dump iron filings on a glass plate and you put a magnet under it? Well, those lined up in lines, right? Not just this homogeneous blob of black stuff. Those lines are magnetic field lines. And they literally act like guitar strings. So when you pluck a guitar string, what happens? Vibrates, right? And it has a frequency or a note. Well, the magnetic field lines of Earth work exactly the same way.
That's huge.
So what's plucking the lines of Earth is the solar wind rushing by. So they're vibrating. And that's what you're seeing here in this visualization, is the ringing of the Earth's magnetic field lines. Now, when we measure them on Earth, this is the frequencies of these, what are called field line resonances, is the technical term for them. So these are the peaks of them. And one of the peaks that we often see is down in the first one is 0.1 hertz.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of relevant because that is exactly the same frequency as the coherent human heart rhythm.
So we're talking about frequency and wavelengths and all that stuff here. We did an exhaustive deep dive into this in the early days, like episode 20s. Maybe we'll come back in that. But frequency is just how it hurts, right? How many times a second is this sound happening? That's faster. So higher. That's slower. And the frequency is just how fast or slow.
Get what I just said? Our hearts, when we're coherent, in other words, when we're loving, appreciative, caring, is the same frequency as Earth. But all of those resonant frequencies of Earth overlap with the rhythms in our nervous system, in our cardiovascular system, in the same range. Okay, the other set of frequencies we're measuring with our global monitoring system are called Schumann resonances.
Schumann resonance.
And these are magnetic waves that are basically trapped, if you will, between the surface of the Earth and the bottom of the ionosphere. Ionosphere you could think of as a big soap bubble around the planet.
That's a fantastic place for us to pause for today, and we'll come back into this tomorrow. But we're talking about all these electromagnetic waves running around between the surface of the Earth and sort of the extent of its electromagnetic packet. And we have the same thing. Not as big, not as strong, not any of those. But just as the center of the Earth has a spinning magnet, so we have a pulsing magnet in the center of ourselves. And this is not metaphorical reaching, right? Like this is, I'm looking through the chat here. NyQuil, that's why it concerns me how much people spread negativity and pessimism all the time. That shit tricks you into only seeing and feeling that. Those ripples spread. Definitely. I mean, it's all one field. And at the same time, here in the back of my head, I'm like, well, so this guy would just have us all go around being happy-go-lucky like nothing's a problem in the world. And it's interesting because that works if everyone does it. And if not everybody does it, there's a holdout. Right, and then the people who are not spreading the happy-go-lucky are require others not to. So it really does spread. So with that said, whatever we're going to spread, we're going to get in touch with our hearts first. So let me set the timer. I'm going to do 10 minutes of meditation here. Clock. I don't know what this is. Okay. 10 minutes. I didn't do the calculator today, so I'm clearly more coherent than I was yesterday. Let's do the 10 minutes, and we will reconvene. For those who are joining us, let me see who's here. I didn't even do shoutouts. Academy Impossible, Amiga, another TV viewer. Boovit, that's a new name I don't recognize. Let's see who else. Curly Q, welcome back. Misery Pimp, welcome back. NyQuil, welcome back, of course. Celia, that's a new name I don't recognize either. Cool. Snow Off the Bluff and What Do Mushrooms Look Like? So a couple new folks in here with us today. So new folks, what we're doing today is a really, really simple, easy meditation. We're going to close our eyes, sit in a comfortable position, and just pay attention to the beating of our hearts. Try to actually feel it and hear it. It's definitely possible. It's 100% possible. So just bring your attention to your heart, and you can, most people's attention kind of, as Snow Off the Bluff says, most people's attention sits on their face. We can train our attention to follow our breath or go in our bones as we do in different exercises. In this particular one, we're going to bring it right to our heart and let it just sit there. Let everything else drop away and focus your attention on the beating heart, feeling it. If you find you're drifting away in that, which can definitely happen, one of the ways you can kind of stick your attention to it is to count. Count the heartbeats, count the heartbeats, count the heartbeats, and keep your attention focused. We're going to go for 10 minutes. I'm going to be mic off, so if there's any background noise or whatever, you won't hear it. So it'll be a dead quiet stream. But in 10 minutes, we'll reconvene and compare notes. And it sounds like Snow Off the Bluff is saying the heart focus led to some breakthroughs yesterday. I think I had some pretty cool interoceptive experiences at minimum yesterday. So let's see what happens. And that's 10 minutes. Wow. The second half of that was really, I got in touch with my heart, and I felt like a lot of hearty stuff, and I felt like my field, shift in magnitude. I'm all buzzy now. It's weird. You may have seen me wake up and look at my phone. It was exactly 11:11, and then I went back in and I got deep. How'd you guys do? That was amazing. I'm like buzzing hard off of that meditation. That was a good one. I want to see if I can find, I know they definitely make like apps for the phone where you can put your finger on the back thing so it can tell you your actual heart rate, so you can actually train yourself off your pulse. But I know that's just the pulse in your finger. That's when it gets to your finger, not when your heart's necessarily pushing it. That's the only thing. But I guess it helps with the rate, at least. I don't know. I feel real good. How about you all? Who's back with me? Who is lost in their heart? Many chambers thereof. NyQuil. I'm going to use earplugs. The train throws me off, but I think it'll work better with plugs. I'll tell you, this time I kept my headphones on. Usually I take them off, and having them on, kind of like closing me in, seems to... I mean, there was no sound coming through them, but just closing in seems to help. Chris, you feel great? Good. Snow off the bluff? You switched on when I started talking. Switched on from... You were like in sleep mode? You mean? That's good. That's good. This is awesome. I think it's awesome that we're all meditating together every day. I think more people would be more at peace if they did this, especially in such stressful times when so much is trying to push that asynchronous wave. Well, let's see who made it through meditation. Everyone deserves a shout out for making it. Academy Impossible, Amiga, Andy WMT, another TV viewer, Buvit, welcome the first time. Misery Pimp, NyQuil, Snow Off the Bluff, and What Do Mushrooms Look Like? So, Snow Off the Bluff, does this mean we're more in resonance with each other? I don't know. I don't know if we can say that. If we were sitting in the same room, I think very much, yes. I think when we do like the theta wave meditations where we're all kind of cueing off of the same prompt, I think possibly even more so. Remotely, I'm not sure. Maybe. I'd like to think so, but I'm just not sure. Well, with that said, it brings us to our grand finale today, and I'm liking wrapping these up more on time. Let me get in touch with my heart here. I always talk about finding our center, but let's do the actual heart. And let's find the nested fields of energy that we constitute and that constitute us. And let's find the many, many, many nested fields of energy that constitute everything with which we constantly interact. And let us observe and realize and accept the flow through all these fields. As he said, the fingers playing the strings of this instrument. And as we pay more attention to them, let us make sure that we allow the strings of our magnetic fields to be played gracefully and beautifully, that they not be restricted or bent or held up by us, by any other, by any person or thing. May we allow that glorious and guiding spirit to pass through our fields to energize us, to bring us to sing forth beautiful music from our very essences, to create notes and tones which will bring things into accord, to create this beautiful harmony across all things, material and immaterial, everything constituted by a field. And as that flowing through all our fields, stroking us, causing us to sing out, is driven by the timeless originator of all flowing. Let us express our gratitude and our humility before that, knowing that we change moment to moment and day to day and year to year, but there is a timeless and ancient one that has been and will be, the same in perpetuity, and therefore we exist in response to and as a result of the more ancient. And so in our fleeting state in this space and time, let us embrace our role. Let us focus our minds and ourselves to the beautiful song being played through us. And let us reverberate in our place in the world as we interact with each and every creature, those that are living and those are inanimate, all things that have been created and did not create themselves. Let us feel our kinship with them, our unity with them. Let us bring them into accord with us. And if they be more harmonious, let us bring ourselves more into accord with them. Let us face the world and each other with love, and let us grant and receive our blessings across generations, across time and space, to one another, to our ancestral lineage, to the spirits before us, to all things and all sources and causes that predate and predicate us. And let us receive their replied blessings, to which we may all say, Amen. Well, everybody, that's number 101 in the books. I love it. I love you guys. I thank you guys. I bless you guys. It feels good to rest in my heart. I hope it feels good to rest in yours. I will see you all over on the Discord. Maybe I'll check out